All right, so we're going to get things started. We've got a good group in the to present to this week or this month. So welcome everyone. If you're new to Avail, welcome. We're going to talk a little bit about what Avail is. So if you're brand new to the software, kind of exploring content management solutions, I'm going to give you a brief tutorial, kind of some big principles of what Avail stands on. And then the focus of this month's webinar is it's now our second annual change management webinar. So we're going to be talking about navigating change, when technology changes within a firm, what does that look like, right? What are the strategies around that change? How do you roll out new technology? How do you measure success around adoption of that new technology so that you kind of have that value and kind of return on investment of new software? We're very familiar here at Avail about how much technology is out there and how much a firm is managing as far as technology platforms. And it's always, really important for us to kind of get customer stories around that change, the challenges, the struggles, the strategies around those things. So we're very excited this year to bring back this change management webinar and bring back a couple of customers to talk about their kind of first year with Avail and what that change management has looked like. What does the kind of the adoption strategies look like? So we're very excited to bring on both Larson Design Group and SOM. So to start things off, to introduce myself, if you haven't seen a previous webinar, my name is Clay Watson. I'm the Director of Customer Success at Avail. Here with me today is my colleague Rob Snyder, our Customer Success Manager. And so we are kind of the customer liaisons, as so to speak, with Avail. So we're here to host webinars, educate our customers, educate firms, and then kind of create these opportunities to give our customers a stage to talk about some of the work they've done with the software, and a kind of about their strategies as a firm altogether. So looking at today's agenda, again, I'm going to kind of give you all a kind of a quick tutorial about what Avail is, some of our core principles. We're going to talk about some of the big kind of critical questions around navigating change and change management. And I'm also going to kind of give you a quick recap of some past insights. So this is our second annual change management webinar. So we did hold our first one last fall, and we had two customers, longtime customers, Diamond Schmitt and SMMA. They were on and joining and kind of sharing some of their insights and practices around software adoption. So I'm going to share a couple of those insights, and then I'm going to kind of get to the meat of the webinar, which is turning things over to our guest panelists at Larson Design and SOM. We will have some time at the very end of the webinar to answer any questions. So there is a Q&A section of the Zoom webinar. Feel free to drop in a question as we're talking and presenting. And then at the very end, we can kind of go in and wrap up things with kind of a formal Q&A and kind of go through those questions. So we'll make sure that those things get addressed. So feel free to drop things in the chat, leave some comments and questions, and we'll get to them at the end. All right, so talking about Avail and what Avail is, I'm going to talk about two very specific principles that Avail stands on. So Avail is a standalone desktop application for content management. So it is a software where you can build a library of assets, and you can manage those library of assets and then distribute those to your teams. So it's a way that you can group your content, tag that content, and then present a very kind of visual first interface for that content. And so two of the principles that we stand on to really kind of make a fully kind of centralized and standardized library is that we are file type agnostic. So what that means is that we kind of consider ourselves Revit first. We're always kind of developing new features around Revit workflows because that is a big majority of what our customers are interfacing with day to day. But we understand that not all project information lives in an RFA or an RVT. There's a lot of information around a project, whether it's visual assets, whether it's a Miro board or a Word document or a PDF set of documentation. All of those files are important for project information, and we support those file types. So this is again back to centralizing a full library of assets, not just Revit, but beyond that as well. We've also recently introduced a lot of AutoCAD and Civil 3D components to fully kind of better support those drawings and those assets. So we've added some layers of like nice visual previews of drafting views and full text searchability around those things, both on the Revit and AutoCAD side. The second core principle is another kind of agnostic branch of Avail, and is that we're file location agnostic. So you can think about where all your files live right now on a local drive, a network drive, cloud storage. Avail kind of sits on top of those storage locations. So we don't actually have to take your content. We do have a host and cloud feature and functionality where you can host your content in our cloud. But you don't have to change the source location of that content. So that can just remain as is. All of the folders and file structure that you've developed over the years can kind of remain the same. But again, Avail is going to lay on top of that structure, going to provide you a much better search experience across that content and a much better visual layer. So we've got some nice kind of graphical ways that you can group content and display that in our desktop. So I'm going to take a minute just to kind of show you some of those things that I'm talking about around, file type agnostic and file location agnostic. So as you can see here, this is kind of the home page. It's a customizable home page of Avail, and this is where you're going to be grouping your content and kind of creating your libraries. So you can see here, I've got Revit families, I've got SketchUp files, visualization, kind of Rhino visualization content. I've got a channel for detail libraries. I've got some AutoCAD, entourage blocks, and even some manufacturer content. So this is a way that you can actually index URLs into Avail, which is a really neat feature. It's a way that you can pull this open and actually visualize a web page and browse that web page in Avail. As far as like the drafting view and kind of the visual components, so what we do here is we kind of give you this way of, again, kind of grouping this content, making it really easy to browse through and not have to click through subfolder after subfolder. It's a really easy way to kind of jump into content and see these nice kind of high-res previews of drafting views and sheets and things. And we also have some abilities that end users can also kind of create their own groupings of content through palettes. So think of it as a way that, you can just kind of group things together and then quickly load it into your Revit project. So again, we can support all these different file types, and we can don't have to change anything about the source location of those files. We just kind of sit on top, present this nice visual interface around channels and some of the graphical key cards, ways to filter content, and give your end users, your teams, a much easier way to search that content and just kind of a more efficient workflow to get that into their project. All right, so to talk about, to kind of switch gears and talk a little bit more about the change management piece of it, right? So last year we kind of formulated this this kind of initiative to kind of hold this change management webinar kind of every year, because I think there's always going to be some new insights, some new ways that firms are finding ways to help improve software adoption and really kind of manage what's going on within the firm when technology changes. So I kind of started off with these three questions, and this is kind of what I presented to our panelists today as well, is kind of focus in on kind of three aspects. Really, kind of the first is defining what successful software adoption actually looks like. And that can have a lot of different definitions, right? It could be different levels of metrics, different levels of usability. There's a lot of different ways that you can measure and define success. So I thought that's an important way that every firm might have their own unique take on what that means to be successful and to roll out software successfully. Number two is kind of what strategies are most important, right? What is kind of the most beneficial ways that you can provide a smooth transition of technology and to prevent as little disruption to the day-to-day workflow. That's the end result, right? You want to have as little disruption and friction, and also kind of roll out updated, advanced technologies, which is a balancing act. It's a challenging task, and I think it requires a focused strategies and direction around the on how that kind of gets done at scale. Number three is what are the lessons learned, right? You're going to go through change a lot year after year. Technology is going to change. You're going to be rolling out new updates and adopting new technologies and trying to get your teams to use that technology as well. So things are going to go right, and sometimes things are going to go wrong. So there's always going to be some sort of component around lessons learned. What didn't work about one strategy and maybe did work for another, and kind of how can you formulate that into a plan and a framework for technology adoption altogether. So that's kind of the three questions that we kind of thought about last year, and that's what we had talked about last year, and I presented to our panelists this year to kind of focus in on these three components of navigating change and change management. So looking back to last year's presentation, if you were able to make it, that was great. This is going to be a nice little recap. But I wanted to highlight some of the strategies that were talked about last year with Diamond Schmitt and SMMA. They were both kind of longtime AVAIL customers. So they were able to provide a pretty nice, you know, uh, holistic plan of what that's looked like year to year on AVAIL, and kind of what that's looked like with different technologies as well. So a couple of things jumped out that I pulled from that webinar. If you do want to reference that webinar, it is up on our YouTube channel, so you can go in and check when we posted that last year. But I pulled out a couple of different notes. So one of those is, understanding that the champions and early adopters are really critical when you're changing technology and you're rolling out, some new software. Diamond Schmidt kind of described it as, they kind of commonly grouped their users as like early adopters, middle users, laggards, and opposition, but they really focused a lot of their attention on those early adopters to really kind of pull along the rest of the groups, because they understood that really kind of giving that emphasis on the people that were kind of right in front and ready to make this change and learning very quickly, they can kind of set this standard, right? They can kind of create a culture around change and the benefits of change and the advancements that change can make at a firm's level. So that was one thing that really jumped out from last year. Another piece was SMMA's comment around, software adoption being behavioral and not just technical, right? We understand that there is a whole deployment initiative around software and rolling out new software, but also understanding that there's this user behavior and understanding at the kind of human level that it's you have to acknowledge during this change. So one of the things that they point out is understanding that success kind of shows up when users are excited about change and excited about answering and just kind of really kind of asking questions, whether it's something is not working or something is working. All of that feedback is really important because it means that users are engaged with what's going on. It's not something that they're avoiding. It's something that they're engaging with and have questions about. So that was a really kind of big takeaway, is that, if they're proactively engaging and asking questions about technology, it can be a lot sometimes. You can get a lot of that at a time, but it's still, I think, overall a positive thing that's happening because that people are engaged, and it's things that you kind of work on together. The third piece from last year's webinar that I wanted to highlight is that kind of the continuous cycle of communication that is involved and sometimes required with change management, with technology adoption, and with onboarding technology as well. So both of the firms kind of talked about this ongoing kind of communication loop, using the tools that you have now, whether it's Teams or Slacks or whatever it is, whatever component you have internally right now, to make sure that you're keeping that communication open, and you're keeping it active. So you're always kind of sharing new things, and you're making sure that there's kind of a periodic restructuring that may be needed for communication and different ways that people can reach out. But it is important to have those feedback loops so that you know that, if a person has a problem or, if they've got really positive feedback, that you're taking all of that in and digesting it and understanding kind of what course to take next. So that's kind of the recap from last year, some of the big takeaways that I wanted to highlight. But again, now I've got the pleasure of introducing and kind of handing things off to our guest panelists. So again, we brought on two customers who started with Avail a little over a year ago. So this is a very different perspective than Diamond Schmitt and SMMA had because they'd been with Avail for several years. Both Larson Design and SOM are kind of a little more of a year in. So they kind of have this very fresh perspective of kind of year one. What does that look like? And some of the strategies that they had in play with all of this kind of change management around Avail, and then kind of what that looks like at the firm level, right? What is that? What is technology adoption? What is that? How do they define successful adoption at each of the firms? So I'm pleased to introduce Stephen Rushmore and Brett Milano at Larson Design and Michelle Cheney at SOM. We've been working with both of these, with all of these parties very closely in this first year and kind of helping them roll out Avail and troubleshooting issues and answering questions and all those things. But I'm going to start off, I'm going to turn things over to Stephen and Brett to talk a little bit about Larson Design, and then we'll jump over and transition over to Michelle at SOM. So Stephen and Brett, take it away.
Cool. Well, thanks for having us, Clay, and the Avail team. Um, we'll kind of get into, roadmap, like Clay said, a little bit of lessons learned, what the initiative was overall. But let me just start with some brief intros and kind of walk through, what is Larson Design Group really quickly. I promise I have to. It's in my contract with my firm, and then we'll kind of talk strategy and lessons learned. So. All right, so just quick intro. As Clay mentioned, my name's Stephen Rushmore. I'm the director of our digital practice. I started out in the architecture industry, but as anybody in innovation or technology knows, you quickly go down this rabbit hole of three-letter acronyms, BIM, SIM, CAD, GIS. So that's kind of gotten me into a lot of different sectors, predominantly federal and our commercial and private sectors. I'll let Brett introduce himself so I don't make a muck of it.
Yep, my name's Brett Milano. I've been manager for Larson Design Group. I was hired on, about 3 years ago, and to take care of the BIM standards. Been in the business for 20 plus years, all pretty much strictly federal as well. Um, I was hired on to take care of their BIM and then, implement Avail here last year. So yeah.
Awesome. Brett's superpower is being humble. So just a bit about Larson, keep it high level. We're a national firm, full service. So everything from architecture to bridge design, founded in '86. And, we're proud to be an employee-owned firm. Just a little bit, we're in 19 offices across 8 states. We started in Pennsylvania and, kind of national sprawl from there, going into new markets and new sectors. And, speaking of markets, I'll just highlight a few you kind of see from our very beautiful pictures is we're very proud of our education, our transportation, our retail markets. And, just once again, it'll be mentioned throughout our journey with Avail and content management is, our employee ownership mindset really does contribute a lot to our process. So, depending on what your firm looks like, it may just differ slightly, but it's top of mind for us. So hopefully that was brief enough, Clay. He scared me. He said not too much about the company.
No, that's great.
Okay. All right, so we'll start with the problem. It's always a logical place to start. I doubt anybody on this call has ever had this problem, though. It's very unique to just us with siloed data. We have things all over the place. And I think our record was we had 86 title blocks with this same name. So it didn't even have the new final on the end. It was just the same 86 times over across the network. So that was one of our largest problems was where is it? And is it is it the latest in the correct version of, say, a title block or a detail? and trying to find it quicker. We noticed, once the heat got turned up on projects, it seemed that everybody couldn't find anything. So that was kind of the biggest problem we were trying to solve is putting everything in one place and confirming that it is the most current and the most high quality of X. Whether that's a BIM family, civil detail, a CAD block, a blue beam stamp, so on and so forth. And so for us, again, with employee ownership in mind, this was a large initiative. We're about 500 staff, but Brett, I might mess this number up. But when we do a search, I mean, everybody knows how to do a search on their network. You do a wildcard.dwg, and you get everything on the network that's a drawing, and you do the same thing for RFAs and RVTs and so on and so forth. We had 380,000 RFAs. That's a mountain of data to get through. So when we looked at implementing some type of system, whether out of the box or internally developed or what have you, it automatically, had to get lifted up to executive leadership. It wasn't going to be just our retail architecture group doing this for the entire firm or just in their own little silo. So we baked it into our 3-year strategic plan to solidify a few things. The importance, our strategic plans are approved by our executive leadership team and our board of directors. So we can't get any more serious than that generally as far as an initiative goes. And also to have the backing, which I'll get into a little later. So we love our acronyms because me and Brett especially are from the federal world predominantly. So we aptly named it DCMS, Design Content Management System, and the search was on, the strategy was on. So we had 3 years to execute it from start to finish as far as funding goes. I think I sugarcoated it whenever I pitched it to the leadership team. It was only going to be about 3,000 hours or 1.4 FTEs or full-time employees. But over the course of about a year and a half. And we really wanted to focus on what we split into two kind of groups. I always make the mistake of calling them silos in BIM, CAD, or SIM, modeling. And then the other side of it was data. So that's all of our codes, our references, our analysis tools that are not web hosted. So that's kind of the issue and the approach from sort of an administrative perspective. I'll hand it off to Brett now to actually talk about how it actually went down.
All right, good. Yeah. So during this process of DCMS, that we had a few criteria that we had to go by, and so one of them was search. So we had to have something that had good search capabilities, not just with main file names, but to be able to look down deep into the content and search that as well, right? So that was a very key one, and be simplistic. I think a lot of them had search capabilities, but Avail seemed to have more of a simplistic approach, simple for people to use. And for me, people adopt things that are simple, right? So integration, right? Native integration into our products that we use. As Clay mentioned earlier, yeah, it was Revit centric at the first. So yeah, we were able to get it integrated into Revit. Most have that as well. But Civil 3D, having them add on, let us expand that to our Civil Sim content as well, right? Again, simple approach, simple integration into our products. Structure, that was another key factor, is how it's structured, right? We want to be able to either pull our information in and keep it structured like it is, in the original location, or be able to modify that a little bit. So, Avail gave us that easiest option to be able to structure our content to make it easy for people to search, make it easy for people to find the content that they're looking for. A single platform as well, right? So when we started this, BIM was our goal, right? To get up there first, right? And then when they started implementing their civil 3D add-ons, that helped us, launch our Civil 3D portion of our DCMS. So being able to bring that all into one platform was very beneficial and very important to us. Next slide. So we broke it up into two parts. Part one, our primary track, was our design content, as Stephen mentioned earlier. This included all our BIM content at first, right? Revit family, standard details of all disciplines, but mainly we started with architecture and structural because that's where a lot of our content resided. As we started going forward and the Civil 3D side of it started coming in, we had the sim content jump on board and work parallel with us, right? Going on the same track in that primary track. So pulling out our Civil 3D details, the CAD standards, getting those updated so everything's consistent, right? So at some point, BIM and Sim were working parallel with each other. We started with BIM first, but we knew Sim was important as well. So those at the end of it, they were, or in the middle of it, they were working parallel with each other. Our part two was a follow-on track, was design data. So we broke them up purposely so we weren't skipping and falling over each other, right? So design data is more the codes and references or calc pages, things of that nature, anything that had nothing to do with like the BIM and SIM content itself, right? That's a design data part of it. So we're currently into that right now, going through, taking out what we don't need, taking out duplicates, making sure we're getting the most latest and greatest that we have on our server. So next one. So design content part one, BIM. So this is the phases that we took for BIM, and obviously Sim jumped in, followed along with us. But quarter two of 2024, phase one, we call it discovery. And as Stephen showed before, we discovered that our room was just flooded with stuff. Nobody wanted to clean it up. So what we did is took hours and went through servers and just picked out what there was there. I can find information that's just scattered all over. Obviously, it wasn't just me and Steven. We put a team together to just go discover what we've got out there right now for the first phase. Phase two is the organization part. So we send teams out there with the stuff that they discovered and then start organizing it into a folder structure that made sense, right? And that kind of led into the phase two with the standardization. Once they got done with the organization part of it all, it was standardization. It was parameter standardization. There was file naming standardization. Anything you could think of that would standardize content is what we did, right? So big key in phase 2B. Phase three, quarter three of 2025 and beyond, is QC and injection into AVAIL itself. So we sat down once everything was standardized, go through a QC process. QC process was very important just for the fact that, we had a lot of team members into this. We just want to make sure that what they've done was quality controlled before we inject it up there because nobody wants to do rework. Might as well do it right the first time instead of have to come back and redo it again. So that was big and key into these phases was quality control and then the injection part up into AVAIL. Next slide, please. Design content part two was the Sim and Civil 3D CAD. Now, this followed the same path as the slide before, but again, it started a little bit later, but ended up in parallel with the BIM content, right? So early kickoff was in 2025. We dedicated that track for it. We had a lot of coordination between civil and infrastructure to align and find the stuff that they needed to standardize and put up into AVAIL. We ended up with about 1,200 civil CAD files that we needed to standardize in QC before quarter three of 2025, which is a heavy lift. And that's everything from text size, layers, view titles, all that we standardized before we launched everything. And then figuring out, how do we want to organize that up on AVAIL themselves, right? We ended up launching our sim in early quarter of 2025. And then, yeah, so far it's been going great on that part of it. Next one, next slide. Oh, I'll hand it back off to Steven.
Awesome. And I just want to throw out there, and thanks for diving into the weeds, Brett. If anybody has questions as far as, how we went from 350,000 files to 12,000 CAD details, or I forget the number of BIM components, just please find us on LinkedIn or reach out. There's a number of tools that don't work at all, and there's fun ones that we found that work very, very well. So as far as change management, we have all this content. And as Clay mentioned, implementation is just the first part. If everybody started implementing things, nothing would ever be adopted. It would just be chaos. So we had to kind of walk through, how we were going to condone change or help the change move along. So, just a few words of wisdom, if you will appease me, is, we started with executive sponsorship. This isn't always possible, but for something this large, if you're considering implementing a content management system such as AVAIL, it's pretty large. So try to get your executives on board, and not only that, but have that top-down direction. So have them involved and kept up to date. So when people inevitably say, "What is this DCMS thing?" They know and they can support you. And then going from that into a champion network. Brett and I have obviously implemented a lot of change and standards and software over the years. But with the scale of this, we thought it'd be better not to just have a few champions, say one from architecture, one from engineering. And that's where the 3,000 labor hours came in, unfortunately, but it worked out in the end. It was just a bet. But we had about 30 people across all of our disciplines, and one of the adverse effects that, I don't think we planned for, I could try to claim credit, is that we created a peer-to-peer network because it was so large. Is that, it wasn't just digital practice talking to our champion network, it was champions talking to champions and creating that advocacy. So I would highly recommend investing the time in multiple people. Starting with a pilot seems obvious. But that should not be your champions. Champions should be at that point supervising. So you want to pilot with people that are in the trenches doing the design work, using AVAIL for the first time with a little bit of guidance and giving you extremely honest feedback. From there is just keeping that conversation going. We had bi-weekly cadence calls, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We got all of it. We had to go back to the drawing board a few times. We had to go to AVAIL a few times. But that's how you iron out the wrinkles. And then, nobody really wants to hear this, but sometimes you have to push just a little more. So we had really good adoption. I think we had 100 users within the first few weeks, at least log in and take a look at the new shiny thing. But people were still going and finding their old content on OneDrives or SharePoints or wherever they stored content. So we kind of had to push them along a little. So as we started phasing out old library locations that we sourced all this data from, people naturally started to trickle into AVAIL more often. So I think that's one approach. There's probably many. And then training. I'm a huge advocacy of training. It's one of the core values at Larson. This just made sense. We have an LMS platform where all of our trainings are held. Brett did a majority of the BIM trainings. We've split it up by BIM, SIM, and just general, and then publishers and consumers. And everything was recorded, transcribed, all the documentation, and pushed up to our LMS platform so that anybody new coming in the door, they could hit the ground running. So that's kind of the framework. The results were great. 200 users so far across our vertical and horizontal sectors. The hands-on training made people comfortable. Video recordings are great. I just mentioned that it's easy access, but people like hands-on as well to be able to do the Q&A. And just making sure the resources are available. We have our internal intranet site. It's right there, AVAIL, right beside our LMS and our health and safety. It's top of the list. Content builds the projects, so it's very important to us. And we're always, kind of farming new ideas, asking people, what could we do better? What doesn't make sense? And kind of make it communicative. But not everything went perfectly. So a few, skeletons in our closet as far as, lessons learned is, starting with that pilot. I mentioned it shouldn't be your champions. Well, that was after we figured it out. So we had to pivot, go to operations, and get a totally unbiased group of people. So that's the first lesson. And then I think Brett had a few comments here as well.
Yeah, so up on the sequence is very important, and I learned that real quick that things can get away real quick. Although I like the initiative people do and want to push forward, but going faster than what we can go was a problem there. So we had to really stick with the sequence that we come up with to keep people on track, to not get ahead of them and tripping over, and then all of a sudden you forget what you're doing because you're like, I'm already over here. I've already got it all standardized and stuff, but everybody's still in discovery. So sequence was a big deal. We ended up getting that kind of rolled in and on track. So yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, and as far as sequence goes too, like redundancy, this is a year and a half initiative. And it's still ongoing, but like to get to the first finish line was about 18 months. Build out redundancy. If you have that one champion from a vertical sector, make sure more than just that person are kind of being kept up to date. We all know our industry, things, we have turnover, people move around. So redundancy would have helped us a lot. We definitely had a few dead ends. Um, like I mentioned, archiving the old to force in the new. I don't know who put this pun in here, but that's fantastic. It's a powerful adoption lever. It's one of the most powerful ones available. Sorry. Um, and then leadership sponsorship. I can't say it enough. I mentioned executive backing, but even just department and group leadership being kept up to date. It's a big switch. When as soon as somebody can't find something on a project, such as like a culvert detail, somebody's going to lose their mind. So just make sure that you're communicating a lot. And then I just have to say, the platform that we chose, Avail, to roll out our content, it's a long-term bet. There's a lot of platforms out there for a lot of things, content management being one of them. And I think we're winning the bet. I don't know about you, Brett, but
Definitely.
do your research, ask questions, is kind of the lessons learned there. But that wasn't a negative. That turned out great for us. And then just wanted to say, thank you to Avail and everybody attending. Larson Design Group. I'm a dad. I'm super corny. We're big fans of Avail and Bluey for that matter. But thank you.
That's great. Yeah, thank you, Steven. Thank you, Brett. I think, yeah, I mean, planning is important, right? Planning and process, understanding those phases. I mean, that can look a lot different for different firms, right? You might have just two phases, or you might have four. But I think that's a really great point. And something that you all considered heavily is building that process in those phases to make sure that, every step along the way, you've got milestones in place. And another thing that you kind of pointed out, and something that I didn't add to the recap from last year, but it is another point that had come up with Diamond Schmitt and SMMA last year, is that it takes more than just one person or even just one team. And, this is an opportunity. When change like this is happening and you're rolling out new technology, it's an opportunity to build a cohort within your firm, within your organization, and kind of create you know some networking opportunities within the firm, which isn't always a available option as everyone's kind of moving and doing their own things. But it's a great thing to kind of bring people together on a mission and an initiative, which is a lot big advantages there for just the culture and overall, community of the firm.
Sure.
All right, cool. So we're going to switch over, and I'm going to let Michelle Cheney at SOM take over and talk about the strategies and lessons learned from SOM.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So as Clay just said, my name is Michelle Cheney. I am the BIM standards lead at SOM. I'm going to go over a little bit about the firm as well to kick us off. So SOM, we're just over 1,000 employees in 14 offices globally. Been around for 90 years. I have been at SOM for 3 years. So this has been a fun change. I held a similar role around standards at a previous firm for about 10 years. So fun to kind of come to a new place and work on this. So SOM has a variety of project types that we work on from kind of all the sectors available. And then we also are multidisciplinary. So we do have engineering, we have planning, graphics. So trying to figure out how to bring everyone together was obviously like a key part of this. Like I said, we have everyone kind of everywhere, which played a role into how you roll things out with time zones. It's super fun. At the time that we were rolling out AVAIL, there was kind of a lot of change happening at SOM around design technology specifically. So I started 3 years ago. Last year, we brought on a chief design technology officer, and it was really a change in strategy of SOM, kind of trying to come together, especially around this topic, a number of others as well. But I was kind of the first hire to like a global team before we had structure, and then bringing in a chief role to kind of help stabilize the structure and assemble the team. And so our team, as of right now, this is missing a dot for some, there it is. So our design technology core team is in New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. I'm also like the anomaly. I actually live in Colorado. So we're all kind of all over the place, but we support a larger network of our SOM teams in many countries. So that was obviously like an initial fun challenge and piece to work through. And so we so we brought on AVAIL last year, fall time. And before we picked a platform, some of us had preferences, myself included. And so it was nice to be able to kind of have a clean slate and a team coming together on this, but obviously that also brought some changes. So when we were looking at platforms, we had, because we were making this change and like the company was restructuring around this, we needed it to be user friendly. We'd learned through some conversations that had happened, there was some mistrust or distrust in systems and where to find stuff, and I can find it, but is it the right thing? So we knew we needed it to be user friendly, which then makes it trustworthy. In theory, we needed it to be able to grow. One of the things I'm going to talk about at the end is just kind of, we didn't like jump into the deep end. We definitely like dipped our toe in the beginning. And eventually wanted it to be more than just Revit. We are a Rhino and Revit design studio focused firm. And so we knew eventually we were going to get there, but we also we were going to start with one bite of the apple before we went all the way in. So that was a really big part of like figuring out the right platform for us. And, Stephen and Brett mentioned, like, do your research. There are a lot of options out there. And, everybody has a different preference and a different need. So this was, what we felt was the best move for us. So then we moved into kind of like a development phase. So we were using a platform before that we were transitioning off of. So we had some content. We had maybe a different problem, a similar but different problem than was brought up earlier. We had content, but it was like past project. It wasn't really centralized places. And the content we had that was centralized, like I said, it had lost some trust with folks. So stuff was broken. They weren't really sure if it was the right thing to use. And part of that is that we had great team members working on stuff, but it wasn't anyone's kind of dedicated role in this. So again, this was part of like a restructuring of the company, like the firm-wide level of how we were going to focus on this. So a lot of that was like, okay, we have a lot of stuff out here. What can we trust? What do we bring forward? How do we make sure we don't lose stuff in case we want to reference it? But we don't want to just move a bunch of stuff to a new platform if people are still going to lose trust in it. So that was something that was really important when we were working through the development piece of this. I will say too, when we were selecting our platform and working through the development piece, we met with other customers of Avail, and that was super helpful for me. So I'm more than willing to do that if anyone here is considering it. But it was helpful to just see different strategies, like, and kind of pick and choose from that. I was really grateful for the time that some folks spent with me. I didn't fully agree with everything they were doing, or they didn't agree with some of what they were doing too. They were like, I wouldn't do this again. So there were just really good conversations up front to make sure, again, that we were trying to like give our users the best platform moving forward. And for me too, like I had never used Avail, so I was also learning and building at the same time. We worked through content migration. It was like Clay was saying, like these opportunities let you build relationships within the firm too. And as someone who was newer, and also like I'm a fully remote employee, so it was a fun way to like get to work with IT more and understand like what they needed. They joined our Avail weekly calls. And it just was like a great time for us to like figure out how to do some of this stuff together. They helped a ton with our content migration. And just, I don't know, all of the things. Like, I'm not an IT person. I don't understand all of the install stuff and the licensing and the security risks. So, lean into that wherever you can. Like, you don't have to have all the answers to all the things. And Avail was helpful when I had no idea what they were talking about. I was like, I think you guys need to talk to each other, not through me. So definitely, lean into that. And like Stephen and Brett mentioned too, pilot groups are really important. We also launched a pilot group, found kind of key boots on the ground end user people. That was who I wanted to talk to because we had heard about some lack of trust that people had. I wanted to make sure we weren't just going to repeat the problem again. And so it didn't really matter what I wanted it to be. It didn't really matter what our BIM managers wanted it to be. That was a piece of it, but like, we're not the ones that are going to use it every day. And so I think remembering like who your client is, like for me, that's the staff that's actually using this every day. Obviously I have thoughts and opinions and ideas, but like, I'm not using it the same way that our users are. And so I would just say like, make sure you have people that can give you that perspective, and aren't just going to like, yeah, sure, that sounds good. Or are going to be like, well, I would do it differently. That's fair. But we need to think about the people like actually using it at the end of the day. And then on the implementation side, we did onboarding sessions with Avail, like as our first rollout. I was a stickler about keeping them short. I don't know about any of you because we are on an hour-long webinar right now, but like people don't often give up an hour of their time anymore. People give up maybe 20 minutes. Like they're more willing to agree to a 30-minute calendar invite. I think that's what we did. And we said like, this is going to be 20 minutes. And I think for the most part, we nailed the 20-minute mark. We did do 3 of them because as you saw, we cover a lot of time zones. So we had to kind of mix it up there. In the 3 years I've been at SOM, we get kind of mixed attendance because of the span of time zones, but we had a great turnout. I was pleasantly surprised, which showed people were excited, which, we've kind of all been talking about so far here is that excitement is really helpful. And we had one resource on our intranet that pointed to our videos. People knew like, this is the place I can go, like single source of truth again about that, like establishing trust. If that's something that you're facing when you're going to implement something like this, like keep it as simple as possible was the thing that we found really helpful. And then sometimes it meant like doing one-on-one sessions. We had some ways to see like where people were accessing content, and it was a little big brothery, but also like I would just send messages to people and say like, hey, I see you're still using our old platform. Do you know this exists? Are you having trouble? Are you missing something? Like that was how we were going to figure out how to move people along. And eventually like that slowed down, but some of those calls with people, and they were just like cold calls. Cause again, I'm newer and I'm remote. It was just like, hey, we saw this, how can we help? And sometimes it was an install issue. Sometimes it was like, I didn't know. And those are all really important things that if someone doesn't know that who to go to, if they don't know that they can ask anyone. And again, this kind of goes back to us just with some culture shift. It was really helpful. They were like, oh, this is great. Like now I know I can ask that. So I guess like don't be afraid to take a little bit of time to like do something like, oh, like they should have gone to the onboarding. They should have done fair, but they didn't. So like you still have to address this situation one way or another. I'm just gonna go through a couple key takeaways on our end that kind of fold into like our strategies and our lessons learned. So we were really focused about getting our content on the new platform, and we were also starting to roll out new content. So we didn't want to just kind of flood it with everything else. So we kind of confined the older stuff to one place. And then we had other channels, which were going to be kind of our SOM approved, the new stuff. So maybe differently than what Stephen and Brett mentioned, like they did a lot of this work beforehand, getting ready for the platform. We were I don't saying that you're building the plane in the air is flying is not always like the best analogy, but like we kind of were, but not in a sometimes that has such a negative connotation to it. And we didn't want to leave the plane on the ground forever. We didn't want to get stuck there, I guess. And we had enough that like we could start to take some small steps to get some wins. It also meant like we didn't roll out all of the features that Avail has day one because we were trying to get people like to take a step with us, and we didn't want to like sprint and have everyone else still stuck behind. So like we didn't talk about palettes really in onboarding. Like the video, we gave them access to it. We didn't obviously like it's there. We didn't talk about it. We didn't share how it could be used yet. We did that 2 months in. Coincidentally, we also aligned that pretty well with the organizational palettes, which was also helpful for us establishing trust of like, this is SOM approved, like use this, you know? So there was also benefits in like our timing with some Avail's timing, and that like continues to still be true, which is lucky for us. But even like related content, we didn't roll that out in the beginning. We did that with a couple things. We started with our structural group because they had a lot more content like solidified. And those were opportunities like Clay had mentioned earlier, it's going to be one of my takeaways next too, is about communication. Talking about related content meant like I was meeting with our structural studios and I was saying like, hey, you can do this thing now. And they're like, oh, that's really cool. And then like that buzz started to generate, and that, held us over for a couple weeks, a month or so. And then we'd talk about something new. So it wasn't this like overwhelming fire hose of information all at once. Same thing with like tags and how we organized things. Like, some people's approach is a lot of tags. Like that's the great thing about Avail is it's super flexible. We kept it super simple. Like some of our channels don't have any tags. Some of them have like 5 tags. Like we weren't trying to overwhelm people. And again, part of that's because we also don't have a ton of content. We don't have the thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of content right now on there. We're building our way up to that. So we were like, let's not overcomplicate it if we're not there yet, if we don't need it yet. So don't be afraid to like think that you have to have it all figured out in the beginning. Versioning was another thing that like Avail offers with Host and Cloud. Our authoring version of content was Revit 24. We had projects up to 26, but we were trying to weigh the pros and cons of the user experience and what we were introducing to them and how we wanted to handle stuff. And so we held off on doing versioning, and people just, each family they loaded in, they upgraded, wasn't the end of the world. But again, it let us have some conversations with teams saying like, okay, do you like this experience or this experience? Like which one would you prefer? Because there's pros and cons to all of this, right? We have to download the content for the versioning, and it also let us work out some kinks with the Avail team when I kept finding things not versioned, and it was like there was some good teamwork there. And yeah, again, it was just another thing we could communicate of like, okay, we hear people are saying like, why do I have to upgrade this content every time? What's happening here? Okay, we have another option. Like we can talk about that. And we went back to like our pilot group and our champions and kind of both of those, right? The champions being maybe some of the BIM managers, some of your leadership, but then also like the people actually using it, because again, they're using it in a different way than like we might be on like the management side of things. So then the other thing is like, don't be afraid to make changes. We've already made plenty of changes from what we first thought. Harvest changed in kind of the middle of our rollout, which led to some changes on how we organized things. It led to changes on how our stuff was saved. And we've also changed like how we've organized our cards and our channels. And literally this morning we were having a conversation, myself and some of our team, of like, what do we want to do with this? Now we have new content here. Like, it's okay if it's not perfect. Good is the enemy of perfect, right? So like get something out there, have something to react to and work from, and don't be afraid to like make a change. For us, because we didn't have everything built out and everything like up there already, it's a lot easier for us to like, as we're growing, realizing like, oh, we shouldn't call it that, we should call it this. Like that doesn't make any sense anymore. And then lastly, like we've already talked about, like the, Clay summary highlighted, we all know just in life, communication is key. It is also in this, right? Whether that's like talking to a bunch of groups up front, coordinating internally with IT and like other, digital practice folks on your team. Just like getting something up there and communicating about it is really important. I reached out to our IT team and I was like, did you have any takeaways? Like anything I should share? And their big takeaway was like the team was like the AVAIL team was really responsive, which was helpful for them. And they also echoed like this was, I don't want to say the first time, but the first time in a while that like teams within our organization could kind of collaborate on something and have this like successful rollout. And they also learned a lot about deployment and different things like that we've taken forward into other platforms. So yeah, and we continue to like send new messages about what we're doing, about new features that are being rolled out. And because we are rolling out new content libraries at kind of a regular basis, it gives us a new chance every time to like highlight that this is our platform and just start to continue to see that adoption, and just like keeping that communication loop going. So that's it for me. Thanks, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I think there you've kind of mentioned a couple of things. You had that iterative approach, right? It doesn't have to be everything all at once. Parse it out, focus on, specific milestones and hit those along the way, bring people together and be patient, right? It is a process. And I think you had a good point about it's, you don't have to sprint. You can kind of work through things together and get to that end result together in the correct way. Um, so yeah, thank you for sharing that. So yeah, thank you both for Larson Design and SOM. I mean, I think these are stories that we want to broadcast, right? Rob and I could sit here and tell you, right, and outline these things, but it's always great to kind of hear people's experiences, and that's kind of where you can kind of create connections and understand, similar situations. If your firm is similar or different or somewhere in between, it's the story and some of these strategies that can be really, really impactful, with people kind of going through some of the same problems. This is not unique to any one firm. It's a problem, for this industry and many others, right? The vast change in technology, and understanding again how to do that successfully with as little friction to that day-to-day workflow. That's something that we find really, really important. All right, so we do have a couple of questions that came through, and then so we'll answer those, and then I'll have a couple of things to kind of wrap things up, and kind of look about what's next down the line. We'll have a webinar next month that we can kind of tease. But let's pull up these questions now. I have three questions. The first from Wadith, I think these referring to AVAIL. So can AVAIL be used for materials for renderings and visualizations? Yes. So we support, there's many firms, having a material library in AVAIL, visualization content in AVAIL. So we support all of those file types, right? It's all about that file type agnosticism that we support. We have another question from Prim. This is directed to Stephen at Larson Design. He says, "Great to hear your firm's success story on adapting AVAIL. Will you be able to share the strategy you used for tagging your content? Did you use any universal convention or something to standardize the tags so that it's relatable to every user and new user in your company?"
Sure. Yeah. And thanks, Prem. Yeah, if it's broke, don't fix it is kind of my mantra in life. So we did
Yeah.
approach classifications of content for BIM with master format. It's pretty standard approach for us. And then for BIM details, and Brett, you're on the line here in case I say something stupid. We took a uniformat approach, so assemblies of architectural engineering elements. For the civil side, it wasn't so simple. If you try to cram civil stuff into a uniformat or a master format, all the civil engineers get kind of mad about it. So we kind of found commonality using AI to identify all the file naming and found 10 categories that they fit into the box. And then we add subcategories from there as needed.
Fantastic. Cool. Michelle, did you have any universal standards that you were following for your tagging that you're doing for some of the new content?
The fun part about being a part of a global firm is the word universal is not universal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's something we still are working through, and that comes down to kind of everything we're organizing around, like even our naming, right? We're working through like bathroom layouts right now. Just that
Yeah.
word alone has sparked such a conversation with all of our different office locations and where we're doing work. So honestly, like I don't have like a golden ticket answer. We're trying to figure out again, like what is the user going to look for? So if you go into Imperial content, you would call it a restroom accessory. That's not a weird thing to call it. So do we have it different between them, like between our Imperial and our metric content channels? And we're still in that process of working through it. So I don't have the answer, but yeah, universal is a fun trying to find the right word to use that everyone will understand.
Yeah.
We're working through that still. If
Yeah.
we figure it out, we'll let Clay know and we'll come back for round
Do another
two.
webinar. Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you for those insights. We've got a good shout out from Rob Sawell, one of our customers, just kind of giving some kudos to the Avail team, and I'm going to let our Rob take all the credit for that. We've got a really great customer success manager who very hands-on with customers. We got another question from Jorge. What about change management process caught you the most off guard? And I'll let Michelle start with this one and then turn it over to Larson.
Yeah. I think for me, it was interesting coming into a new firm and being a part of change management when I had been somewhere else previously for as long as I had. I did start on the design side of things. So I worked on projects and then I like entered into the role of managing our standards and our content development. So it was a little bit more natural. I think coming here, it was interesting to join something new and then be a part of something changing, but also like exciting. And so I don't know that I have one thing. I think the realizing how quickly the establishment of trust was something that I don't know if I'd say it caught me off guard, but that kind of became like a guiding light throughout it at least, to make sure that people knew that whatever we were doing, they could trust it in the long run. I don't know that I would have anticipated that kind of coming into the process.
Cool. Stephen and Brett, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, the thing that caught me off guard, and maybe it shouldn't have, was just the hesitant of change, right? With some staff, and come to find, this is where I'm like the simplistic and get people to trust you and something simple for them to use. It really changed that around. But yeah, it was that caught me off guard the most, is people just kind of wanting to avoid change because they're so used to doing something.
Yeah.
But then we spun it around and made it really simple. And now those people are some of the loudest voices for Avail.
Good.
So
Yeah. All right, great. Last question from Sneha. Have you used the platform for marketing content, like project photography, or social photos, etc.? Do you use a channel for that at all, or do you have plans to do that in the future?
I'll jump in real fast. We're testing that currently.
Oh yeah.
You know, for marketing materials like, PNG images, logos, PowerPoint templates, it's great. It's single source of truth. You just double click the PowerPoint template and it opens it up in PowerPoint. Done. Project photography, that gets a little complex. And let's be honest, Avail might send us a bill for storage costs. So If we could introduce something like machine vision where it can actually know that it's a boat, even though we've never designed a boat, that'd probably steer us to push
Yeah.
in more. But we're testing currently.
Yeah.
Yeah, for us right now, we're just focusing on Revit content and hoping to
Yeah.
expand that more on the design technology side. So to Rhino and other things, seeing where we can tie in some of our training. Our marketing team has another platform that they're currently using. So
Yeah.
because again, we were kind of taking small steps, we're gonna see where this goes. But like also understand the capabilities there. So yeah, we'll see where it goes.
All right. Excellent. Well, that finishes up the questions. So I'm going to reshare. And Prim does send a little comment and thank you both for answering their question. Um, so looking forward, looking about what's next. So a couple of things. If you're brand new to Avail and you have additional questions, right? You're kind of maybe kind of digesting what we talked about today, some of the insights and strategies from some of these customers for today's panel. Feel free to reach out to Will Rouse, our sales director. Happy to answer any questions. You can jump on a call, walk you through Avail, talk about the problems, the challenges that you may be facing right now with content management and how Avail can provide a solution for that. If you're a current customer and wanting to kind of strategize about Avail, maybe you want to refresh Avail, change how that content is structured and organized, reach out to myself or Rob. We're happy to do one-on-one calls, jump on, again, talk about what's working, what's not working, ways that we can change it, new features that may be available or coming soon to kind of help with different workflows. So feel free to reach out. We're very open and available to meet with our customers. So looking ahead, looking at next month. So we're going to have a very exciting webinar next month, really kind of focusing on Avail's next chapter. So a lot of what we talked about and what we've built in the platform so far is around content management. We're introducing some new features around change tracking in a container library. So understanding, when drafting views changed, what changed, who changed them, all that kind of really valuable information. We're adding some features to capture that change and give you that history. We're also adding a feature around content submission. So again, this is kind of formulating this next chapter of Avail of kind of taking our structure or kind of our foundation of content management and moving that into a kind of a full content lifecycle and QA QC platforms. It's a big, heavy emphasis that we're moving into around QA QC. And this kind of change tracking technology, along with content submission, is building some new components to capture that content's life cycle from start to finish, right? As it kind of leaves a project, enters the library, and then back into future projects. So join us. We're going to send out some invites very soon on July 22nd at 2 p.m. But until then, again, reach out with any questions. Happy to meet. Stephen invited everyone to message him on LinkedIn, so feel free to send him a message and ask for their feedback and really kind of honest opinions on kind of the experience that they've had so far. I think that goes a long way. So thank you all again. Thank you, Larson Design and SOM, for joining today, and thank you for everyone who's attended.
Thank you.
Yeah.